Hello everybody, welcome to the Adam Clery football channel. I am, by extension, Adam Clery, and if you are a Crystal Palace fan, which statistically you probably are if you clicked on this, you don't need an introduction, do you? And yeah, we finally got all the new assets and the new graphics. Anyway, first, we got something in this game of football we have not seen in the English game for absolutely years. A completely deranged, out of pocket, in his own head, Pep Guardiola Cup final starting 11. No defensive midfielder, nobody who can really sit, nobody who can compete physically with what Crystal Palace have. This is a man visibly traumatized by the fact he should have been 3-0 down in the game at the Etihad. So, not wanting to end up in that exact same situation again, he devised this plan to stop it and, spoiler for the thrust of the entire video, ended up in that exact same situation again. So I'm going to show you what Pep Guardiola thought he was doing with this system and why it just made no difference whatsoever to Ollie Glasner's Crystal Palace. Now, because it is impossible to tell the story of this game without first telling the story of the 5-2 at the Etihad, Palace were excellent in the opening stages of that game because of the width that their wing-backs allow them to create. Now, Palace fans, you've seen this a million times this season. They're so aggressive with the wing-backs, in particular Munoz, that it stretches out opposition back fours in particular to give Eze and Sarr and whoever plays the number 10 roles loads of space in these half channels, what they're called, half spaces, the pockets, to work in. And the opening goal in that other game is just this exact formula. They stretch out on the right-hand side here. The back four loses its line, trying to close down when the ball goes out there. There's a quick ball into Sarr, who's running into that channel. And because Eze started absolutely miles offside, because he's not involved in that part of the build-up, they practice this. It's the easiest tap-in he's ever going to get in his life. And what should have been the third is really similar, except this time it's in a transition, so Man City have given them that space rather than them creating that space, but the principles are all exactly the same. They're still attacking that exact area down the sides of the fullbacks. So Guardiola decided his best bet to stop that happening in the cup final was his use of this man here, Nico O'Reilly. If we look at his heat map from the league game, you will see he's providing a lot of width all the way up and down this left-hand side. He's touching the touchline a lot. He was basically, as the rest of the team shuffled over, the one playing this entire length of the field, which meant, obviously, Palace had all this space in behind him to attack. But here, and I'll show you his heat map from the cup final, the plan was to invert him instead. De Bruyne and Silva kind of shuffled over, made a little bit of room for him, and he came a lot more into this area of the pitch here. So he's still able to provide width, and he can get back and defend wide, but because you've got Doku being the one to attack this left-hand space, he can now cover over, I've knocked him over, into this area a lot better than anybody else could in the other game. With Doku there and Savinho on the other side, you can see here in the early minutes, they were both hugging the touchline, trying to stretch Crystal Palace out themselves, but more importantly, because they're so wide, occupying both the wing-backs. And you had Marmoush playing alongside Haaland in what was almost like a conventional big man, little man centre-forward pairing, but behind this four, you had something you almost never see. It was honestly, at times, deliberately a lopsided 3-3. The defenders didn't necessarily shuffle all the way across to get in behind the space that O'Reilly had left, but likewise, neither did this new line of midfielders move along to sort of be more central. And that's actually, like, in theory, a really, really good decision. Like, if I show you Crystal Palace's average positions across the 90 minutes, this won't shock you if you've been watching them all season, but Munoz is a far bigger attacking threat than Mitchell is on the other side. Like, he's the defender in the Premier League who has created the most chances this season. So by doing this, you leave O'Reilly a lot further over to cover this space in behind Doku, but from an attacking perspective, Kevin De Bruyne also thrives in this half space. You don't need him behind Savinho either protecting that space or getting on the overlap. You can have him sitting more in this area by shuffling these three across. And then, like, naturally, because you're lopsided over this side to be more protected over here, you can sort of leave that and then sort of cover the area that De Bruyne's not defending over here. So it did look mad at times, and it didn't do it all the time, but it was a good idea. And it nearly worked really early on. Like, because Mitchell is the less attacking of the two wing-backs, you want to play in front of him, not the space in behind. De Bruyne gets the ball in that area exactly where you want him to be, and he picks out Haaland at the back post. And were it not for a great save from Henderson, which was a bit of a theme in this game, that's City 1-0 up. This is a masterstroke. So yeah, I mean, what an idea then. Pep Guardiola, super genius, but small downside, it does mean when you're defending, this is sort of the shape you have. Now, I have one leg, no knees, and a dodgy heart, and I think even I, in this situation, could potentially get Bernardo Silva and Kevin De Bruyne on a quick break. They got a warning really early on, sprinting through the middle where a Gonzalez, a Kovacic, Lewis, dare I say it, Rodri would have been positioned, but they did not learn, and then minutes later, Palace got the goal that wins the whole game. Palace go long from the back, which we are going to talk about in just a second, and nobody in the area this ball lands can compete with Mateta in there. They are not as strong as he is, and more importantly, they are not as determined as he is. So he manages to reclaim that ball, he holds it up, Munoz breaks up that side of the pitch, as you knew he was going to do. Pep, he feeds him in, and there you go. So somehow, incredibly, in the first 30 minutes of this cup final, you've simultaneously got Pep Guardiola inventing a system that is working exactly as he thought it would, and Oliver Glasner still able to exploit it exactly the way he would have exploited any other system. Because for all I genuinely think this is a really clever setup from Pep Guardiola, his brain didn't fall out, this was a good idea, it still does nothing to negate exactly what Crystal Palace were always going to try and do to them. Go back to the very start of the goal. They have got you committed up the pitch in numbers, and they know if they can then release Munoz into the space that you are leaving them by being this aggressive, he will find one of the number 10s arriving into the box. Thus meaning, in some kind of just beautifully twisted logic, that Pep Guardiola was so keen to avoid conceding this kind of goal, he then went and conceded exactly this kind of goal. Football's just so stupid sometimes, isn't it? If we just get rid of Man City and replace them with Crystal Palace, I've got no idea how much I'm going to be bothered to animate some of this today, by the way. I'm recording it immediately after the cup final. This is my Saturday night, but I'm editing it right after I've run the Hackney Half, so God knows what state I'm going to be in. But anyway, we'll go back to Crystal Palace here, and if I show you all the passes out from the back of these two centre-backs, it would have been Gay as well, but he barely did anything, to be honest, on the ball. What do you notice? There's a couple of little tippy-tappies here when they've got it at the back and they're trying to work out whose go it is to go long. But by and large, all of these are going extremely long, either into this area here for Mateta or into this area here for Munoz. I keep saying Munoz as well with a real emphasis on the end, and now for the life of me, I can't remember if that's right or not. Munoz. It's not Munoz, is it? Munoz is funny. Now, it's even more obvious when you bin the centre-backs off and just look at Dean Henderson. Modern-day Premier League goalkeepers. There's dozens left and right here as they try and move an opposition press around. No interest in that whatsoever. He knew exactly where he was trying to land that ball. It was because every time they had it at the back, Man City piled up, and that is what Crystal Palace want you to do. And it's one of those systems, especially when you deploy it against a team like Manchester City, that's not going to work lots. We've all seen the stat, right before the goal, they had 17% of the ball to Man City having 83. But it is one of those systems that when it does work, is going to create you a situation like this, which is infinitely better than the wall of 9 or 10 players you're going to come up against if you've got 83% of the ball. But anyway, so they get in 1-0 at half-time with this, and Pep Guardiola, he's got 15 minutes to come up with some genius masterstroke to try and unpick this resolute defence, and genuinely, all he seemed to come up with for that first 30 minutes was, I would argue, equally as blunt and direct as this was. Doku and Savino, I've got them here, they went from attempting to pin those wing backs back unsuccessfully, in my opinion, to just going around them and desperately trying to get crosses stood up flat into the box. This is combined all the crossing they did in the first 45 minutes. Not really a lot there. And this is all the crossing they did in the second 45 minutes. And if you weren't paying total attention because you're a bag of nerves or you're at the bar or something, I can tell you All but like 2 or 3 of these are from minute 45 to minute 50. So it's clearly an instruction from the changing room, and they just went out and did it. Now, I'm not a coach yet, but I would argue that devising a master plan whereby you're hanging up flat crosses into a box that could potentially have 5 defenders in it, and all you've got, admittedly it's not bad, but all you've got is one Erling Haaland, unlikely to yield dramatic results. That would be my assessment. Unsurprisingly, the 5 of them, but the 3 big centre-backs they've got in there, obviously, in particular, gobbled that up very easily. And in fact, it is quite interesting because the aerial situation, the threat offered by Crystal Palace, was something that Guardiola touched on in the build-up to this game. Now, part of me thinks maybe it was a little dig in the ribs at Arsenal. Part of me thinks it was the credit that they are due. But he did say he thought Crystal Palace were the best set-piece team in the Premier League. Or words that mean that exact thing that are the correct quote, because I didn't look it up. And said complemented skill set was the thing that nearly got them 2-0 up, because that comes from a long throw, which is a set piece, by the way. It's slung in. Palace compete better for the ball, and from the breakaway, they so nearly get that goal. But wind it back a bit, like before the throw-in, that comes from just a weird heads not screwed on right mix-up that City get themselves into. And I think that, as much as the tactics and systems and shapes and all that stuff, is something that's very important to look at. Like, stuff like this was just the indecisive, half-arsed vibe that Man City had throughout the entire game. And despite all of the possession being so weighted in their favour, Palace were fighting them for absolutely everything, and it felt like they were winning an awful lot more than City were. And I actually think very little will surmise the Crystal Palace approach to this game. Quite like this, my favourite ever optograph to steal. This is every single defensive action Crystal Palace made in the entire 90 minutes. It is blocks, it is interceptions, it is tackles, it is headers, it is clearances, it is ball recoveries. Look at where these are focused. City can have as much of the ball as they want. Here, and even into sort of these areas here, and even a little bit round the sides. But as soon as they pose any threat to this Crystal Palace area, every single player, bodies on the line, feet into tackles, being brave, being committed, giving themselves the right to then try and play their kind of football. And it's a total cliche, that expression, like give yourself the right to play, but it is what it takes to go into an FA Cup final against a side like Manchester City and win your first trophy in the history of your club ever, because there are going to be moments where that quality tells, where the possession finally yields chances, and you've got to be in a position and mentally ready to make that block. Maybe it's too late, maybe you can't get there, but maybe, just like the Nico O'Reilly chance later on, maybe they give you that opportunity to make that block. And you're only going to do it if you try to do it. A lot of teams would be like, oh no, we've been played through. I guess they score. Not one single player in that Crystal Palace team was prepared to accept a moment like that. Even in the very, very last minutes of this game, the ball breaks in the box and you've got 2 players, you've got 3 players throwing themselves in the line of these shots in the hope that maybe they'll get a block into that. They gave Manchester City absolutely nothing. And when that didn't work, when Man City just created something instead of being given it, you had Dean Henderson. Dino Zoff, as I've seen him getting called on Twitter. The saves, the penalty, the claims. I'm just obsessed with this hat now. He's absolutely incredible. And should he have been on the pitch in the first place? No. No, of course he shouldn't have been. Like, goalkeepers union here. And even I was like, well, that's a red card. I thought I was going insane, actually, the way people were like, well, you know, the ball's moving away from the goal. I was like, well, yeah, because of course it's going that way. It's because he hit with his hand that way, in that direction, outside the box. But who cares? Like, I thought that Man City penalty was a dive by David Silva, and they got that. So it all balanced out in the end, in my opinion. And just, if you're going to make those sorts of saves and that sort of contribution in a cup final, again, wearing a hat, I think you deserve the entire world. Granted, it's not my most scientific opinion I've ever had on this channel, but I was just really happy for him for reasons. So yeah, this video doesn't need to be like 25 minutes long. It was an incredibly sort of simple premise. Oliver Glasner got the Crystal Palace formula absolutely bang on in this game. There was nothing Manchester City could really do about it, and they got their share of the luck when they needed it, and they made their own luck when they didn't. It's a classic sort of underdog cup final performance. Like, I could stand here for as long as you want talking about the tactical side of it and the structure both teams employed, but absolutely everything in this game, the application, the body language, it was all screaming from the very first minute that Crystal Palace wanted this more than Man City and were going to get it. But if I may just be permitted, as one final point, to rewind like 20 seconds, wasn't really counting, that word that everybody's using, including me just there, upset. Now, I don't think this game here, when you actually think about it, is an upset, really. Like, you would make, based on like the structure of the club and the finances and the value of the squads, you'd make Crystal Palace underdogs, sure, but the result, I don't think it's an upset. And that is because, and this was touched upon in the build-up and on commentary, right, Crystal Palace had a minging start to the season. Those first 13 games when they had to adjust to losing Elise and slightly tweaking the system, a difficult time, you would argue they nearly got Oliver Glasner the sack. But if you take just 1 minute to look at the Premier League table since those first 13 games, so after they got their heads around all of these changes, just look at which two teams are right next to each other. 42 and 41 points. 12 wins to City to 11 wins for Palace, but Palace have actually lost 1 game less in that time, which is like 2/3 of a season-ish, than Man City have. They had every right, in my opinion, to go into this game showing no fear and believing they could win. I don't ever want to hear the word upset about this cup final, right? Crystal Palace are just class. And that's it. That's the whole video. It's somebody else who thought he'd never see his team win a trophy and got to this year. This is brilliant. I absolutely loved this game of football, and I loved this result for the team, for the fans, for Eze in particular. Like, it's what makes football worth watching on occasion. And I think that's the first time I've ever done a video on Crystal Palace, so I'm pleased I waited for an occasion as illustrious as this. And hopefully, hey, it won't be the last one. So if you have enjoyed watching this and you are a member of the... God, what are they? I used to live in Crystal Palace as well. How do I not know this? What do they call you guys? The Palacers. Eagles, fly high, aha, or whatever it is. Please do subscribe to us here at ACFC. I really want 100,000 subs by the end of the season, and I'm getting very greedy about it. So if you could do that, or possibly tell your friends, that'd be great. And as I mentioned before, I'm recording this video before I do the Hackney Half Marathon, but I'll be sitting here editing it. Give them a wave, Saw Adam, on the Monday after I've done it. So it's not too late still if you want to do a quick little donation to calm the campaign for living miserably. That is who I was running for. I presume it went okay. I presume I'm editing this and not in a hospital bed somewhere. Fingers crossed. And meanwhile, you can get me across all the social medias. How cool is that? At Adam Clery, Clery, on every single platform you want. But until next time, thank you so much for watching. You have been locked in to the... That's never going to stick. Adam Clery football channel. Crystal Palace won the FA Cup. Class. Brilliant. Love that. Goodbye.